Melody Park's ancient Honda sputtered to a stop at the iron gates of what could only be described as a fortress disguised as a mansion. Rain lashed against her windshield as lightning illuminated the stone gargoyles perched atop the entrance pillars, their eyes seeming to follow her every movement. The security guard who approached her window looked more like a professional fighter than a doorman, his broad shoulders straining against his black suit as he scrutinized the delivery bag on her passenger seat. "ID and order confirmation," he demanded gruffly, raindrops sliding down his stoic face. Melody's hands trembled slightly as she handed over her credentials, the medical bills piling up at her apartment flashing through her mind. This double shift delivering for Gourmet Now was the only way she could afford her mother's cancer treatments, especially after being laid off from her day job at the community center. The guard's expression shifted almost imperceptibly as he examined her delivery ticket, his eyes darting toward the main house before reluctantly stepping back. "Follow the driveway to the front entrance. Don't deviate. Don't take pictures. Don't linger," he instructed, punching a code into the gate panel. As the massive gates swung open, Melody couldn't shake the feeling she was entering another world entirely. The sprawling estate before her gleamed with wealth despite the darkness, security cameras tracking her every move along the winding driveway, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges. 3 more guards materialized as she approached the grand entrance, their hands hovering near concealed weapons as they surrounded her vehicle. One opened her car door while another inspected the sealed food bags with suspicious intensity, checking for tampering. The mansion's facade loomed above her, all dark stone and Gothic architecture that seemed wildly out of place in this upscale Seattle neighborhood. Lightning flashed again, revealing windows that seemed more like watching eyes than architectural features. "Arms out," instructed a female guard with a facial scar, efficiently patting Melody down before nodding toward the massive double doors. "The kitchen entrance is around back, but tonight you'll deliver directly to the main hall due to circumstances." Melody clutched the insulated food bags against her chest like a shield as they escorted her up marble steps slick with rain. The door swung open to reveal an opulent foyer that could have housed her entire apartment building, crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across polished floors. A crash from deeper within the house made all the guards tense simultaneously, hands moving to weapons as shouting echoed through the cavernous space. Melody froze, heart hammering against her ribs as the sounds of destruction grew louder. "Get down!" a deep voice commanded from somewhere nearby, followed by what sounded like expensive porcelain shattering against a wall. The guards exchanged meaningful glances that did nothing to calm Melody's growing panic. The female guard grabbed Melody's arm, her grip firm but not painful. "Stay here, don't move, don't speak unless spoken to," she instructed, her expression revealing nothing as another crash reverberated through the mansion. A man's anguished scream pierced the air, followed by unintelligible words and more breaking objects. "He's been like this for hours," whispered one guard to another, clearly forgetting Melody could hear every word in the echoing foyer. Through the archway ahead, Melody glimpsed a flurry of movement, men in suits attempting to corner someone, furniture overturned, and a tall figure standing apart from the chaos, his silhouette radiating unmistakable authority despite the turmoil surrounding him. "$3,000 for whoever can calm him down," the commanding figure shouted, desperation evident in his voice as something else shattered against the wall. Melody clutched the food bags tighter, rooted to the spot as fear and curiosity waged war within her. The scene that greeted Melody as she was reluctantly ushered forward defied all expectations. A young man, perhaps 19 or 20, was crouched in the corner of a devastated living room. His hands covered his ears while rocking violently back and forth, surrounded by shards of what had once been priceless artifacts. 4 burly men stood at a careful distance, clearly unsure how to proceed as the young man let out another heart-wrenching scream. "Noise, noise, noise!" he cried, his elegant clothes disheveled and tear-stained, eyes squeezed shut against whatever storm raged inside his mind. The authoritative figure Melody had glimpsed earlier emerged fully into view, a man in his 40s with silver threading through his dark hair, his expensive suit impeccable despite the chaos. His face was a battlefield of emotions, frustration, worry, and unmistakable fear as he watched the young man's distress. "He hasn't slept in 2 days," explained the older man without looking at Melody, speaking as if to himself. "The thunderstorm triggered him, and none of his usual techniques are working." His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, powerlessness radiating from his tense shoulders. The young man suddenly hurled himself backward, skull nearly connecting with the marble wall, before one of the guards lunged forward to cushion the impact. "Don't touch me!" screamed the young man, recoiling violently and scrambling further into his corner like a wounded animal. A crystal decanter exploded against the floor as the young man's flailing foot connected with a side table, sending liquid amber splashing across imported rugs. The older man winced, though Melody suspected it was his son's distress rather than the destroyed antiques causing his pain. "Where's his medication?" demanded the silver-haired man, desperation edging into his voice as he turned to a woman in scrubs hovering uncertainly near the doorway. Her answer was lost beneath another anguished cry from the young man, whose rocking had intensified to alarming speeds. The food bags in Melody's arms suddenly felt impossibly heavy as understanding dawned. This wasn't a tantrum or drug-induced episode, but a sensory meltdown. The guards' attempts to approach only triggered more distress, their looming presence clearly exacerbating the situation. Without conscious thought, Melody placed the food bags on a nearby console and began removing her rain-soaked jacket and shoes. The guards turned toward her with expressions ranging from confusion to suspicion, but she ignored them, focused entirely on what needed to be done. "What are you doing?" the silver-haired man demanded, stepping between Melody and his son with unmistakable protective intent. His eyes were dark with suspicion and a hint of danger that sent shivers down her spine. "Your son is having a sensory overload," Melody explained softly, keeping her voice calm and even. "The storm, the lights, people touching him, loud voices, everything is too much right now." She gestured toward the blazing chandelier overhead and the multiple bodies crowding the space. The man's eyes narrowed dangerously, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "How do you know he's my son? Who sent you here?" His hand moved slightly, and Melody noticed with horror how the guards subtly shifted their stances in response. "Nobody sent me," she replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I've worked with autistic children at the community center for years, and my younger brother has similar meltdowns during storms." She nodded toward the young man still rocking in the corner, covering his ears. Recognition flickered across the man's face, followed by the faintest glimmer of hope. "What do you suggest?" he asked after a moment of consideration, his earlier suspicion not entirely gone, but temporarily overshadowed by parental concern. "First, we need fewer people, dimmer lights, and complete silence," Melody instructed, surprised by her own boldness as she addressed the intimidating figure before her. "He's overwhelmed by sensory input right now. We need to reduce it immediately." The silver-haired man, who had curtly introduced himself as Gabriel, studied Melody for several heartbeats before making a swift decision. With a series of hand gestures that required no words, he dismissed all but 2 guards from the room, had the chandelier dimmed to its lowest setting, and silenced the classical music playing faintly in the background. Melody approached Gabriel's son slowly, making her movements deliberate and predictable, as she settled on the floor several feet away from him. Rather than attempting to establish eye contact or physical touch, she simply matched his rocking rhythm, creating a visual connection without invasion. Gabriel watched with barely concealed disbelief as his son's frantic rocking gradually slowed, his screams fading to whimpers as Melody's gentle presence registered in his awareness. The young man's fingers remained pressed against his ears, but his eyes opened briefly to glance at the stranger mirroring his movements. "My name is Melody," she said in a hushed, melodic voice that carried just enough to be heard. "I'm going to sit here with you until the storm passes, Lucas." She had caught his name when one of the guards had attempted to calm him earlier, using it now with deliberate gentleness. Lucas continued rocking, but his movements became less frantic as Melody began humming a simple, repetitive tune, something her brother had always responded to during his worst meltdowns. The vibration seemed to capture Lucas's attention, his breathing slowing incrementally as minutes passed. When Lucas finally dropped his hands from his ears, Melody reached into her pocket and produced a small fidget cube, a prized possession she carried everywhere for her brother's unexpected visits. Without speaking, she placed it halfway between them on the floor, making no move to force it upon him. Lucas's eyes darted between the cube and Melody's face, wariness still evident in his tense posture. "It helps sometimes," she explained softly, demonstrating how the different sides clicked, spun, and glided beneath her fingers before setting it down again between them. Gabriel remained frozen near the doorway, his expression unreadable as he witnessed the gradual transformation happening before him. The guards beside him looked equally stunned, one actually dropping his professional facade enough to let his jaw slacken in disbelief. After what seemed like an eternity, Lucas cautiously reached for the fidget cube, his fingers closing around it with unexpected gentleness. Melody smiled encouragingly, but didn't speak, allowing him the space to explore the object at his own pace without expectations or demands. "The pressure," Lucas whispered suddenly, his first coherent words since Melody had entered the room. His hand moved from the cube to press against his own chest. Fingers splayed over his heart in a gesture Melody immediately recognized. Without hesitation, Melody reached for one of the heavy decorative blankets draped over a nearby armchair, holding it up questioningly. "Would you like me to show you how this might help?" she asked, her voice remaining gentle and free of any demand or expectation. Lucas nodded almost imperceptibly, his eyes focused somewhere beyond Melody's shoulder rather than on her face. With slow, deliberate movements, she demonstrated how to roll the blanket into a firm cylinder before placing it beside him rather than on him, offering choice rather than imposing contact. Gabriel took an involuntary step forward as Lucas pulled the blanket across his lap and chest, applying the deep pressure that would help regulate his overwhelmed nervous system. The change was almost immediate. His breathing deepened, shoulders dropping as the tension began to melt away. "You're doing great, Lucas," Melody encouraged softly, still maintaining her distance while remaining a calm, steady presence in the storm of his sensory experience. "The thunder will pass soon, and your body will remember how to feel quiet again." Gabriel's phone vibrated in his pocket, drawing his attention momentarily away from the miracle unfolding before him. The message on the screen would normally have demanded his immediate attention, a threat from a rival family that couldn't be ignored. But for the first time in his dangerous life, the crime lord found himself completely disinterested in business matters. As dawn broke over the mansion, Gabriel sat across from Melody in his private study, the heavy oak desk between them laden with more money than she earned in 3 months. "I want you to work for me," he stated simply, his voice leaving no room for negotiation despite the polite phrasing. "My mother's treatments cost $4,000 a month," Melody replied cautiously, unwilling to reveal how desperately she needed the opportunity he was presenting. Her current 3 jobs barely covered the medical bills, let alone rent and basic necessities. Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing her with the calculating precision that had built his empire. $20,000 a month, private suite in the East Wing, comprehensive benefits, he countered smoothly, sliding a contract across the polished surface, starting immediately. Melody's mind reeled at the figure. It was life-changing money, enough to move her mother to a better facility and still have savings. The rational part of her brain screamed warnings about working for a man who clearly operated outside the law, but her heart remembered Lucas's peaceful face as he finally drifted to sleep. "I should tell you more about Lucas," Gabriel said, his expression softening as he glanced toward a silver-framed photo on his desk. "He witnessed his mother's murder when he was 7. She was killed by a rival family while I was away on business." The revelation hung heavy in the air between them, explaining so much about both father and son. "The trauma compounded his autism," Gabriel continued, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "He hasn't spoken more than 10 words to anyone outside this house in 12 years. Melody thought of her own brother, safely living in a specialized group home thanks to a distant aunt's inheritance, so different from Lucas's gilded cage. "What happened to the people who hurt his mother?" she asked, already suspecting the answer from the darkness that flashed across Gabriel's face. "They no longer exist," he replied simply, the cold precision in his voice sending shivers down Melody's spine. In that moment, she understood exactly who and what Gabriel was. Not just a wealthy businessman, but something far more dangerous. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 7 times, breaking the tense silence between them. "Lucas will wake soon," Gabriel remarked, his tone softening again at the mention of his son. "He follows a strict routine. Any deviation causes distress." Melody considered her options, weighing moral qualms against practical realities as Gabriel waited patiently for her decision. The security cameras visible in the corners of the study reminded her that leaving might not be straightforward if she declined his offer. "I need assurances that my mother will receive the best care available," she finally stated, meeting his gaze directly. "And I need to understand exactly what my responsibilities would entail beyond helping Lucas." Gabriel's lips curved into what might have been respect or amusement, perhaps both. "Your primary responsibility is my son's well-being," he explained, leaning forward slightly. "Everything else is secondary, including any business matters you might accidentally overhear." The implied warning was clear, but so was the opportunity, a chance to help a young man trapped in trauma while securing her mother's future. "I'll need weekends to visit my family," Melody countered, surprised by her own boldness in negotiating with someone so clearly dangerous. Gabriel considered this for a moment before nodding once. Acceptable, with security escorts, he conceded, sliding an elegant fountain pen toward her. Lucas has had a revolving door of specialists, none lasting more than 3 months. They fear him, pity him, or fail to connect. Melody thought of Lucas's intelligence hidden behind trauma and sensory challenges, seeing the person where others only saw problems. She signed the contract with steady hands, aware that she was stepping into a world far removed from her previous life. Lucas's schedule was precise to the minute. Breakfast at 7:30 a.m., with exactly 3 buttermilk pancakes arranged clockwise on a blue ceramic plate, never touching the maple syrup until he had cut each pancake into 8 equal triangles. Any deviation caused immediate distress. The mansion staff watched with guarded curiosity as Melody gradually introduced small changes to Lucas's environment: noise-canceling headphones during thunderstorms, weighted blankets for anxiety, and sensory tools disguised as ordinary objects. Unlike previous specialists, she never tried to fix him. He requested to go to the garden today, Gabriel remarked with poorly concealed astonishment, 3 weeks into Melody's employment, watching through the window as Lucas carefully examined the pattern of a butterfly's wings. He hasn't voluntarily left his wing in over a year. The bodyguards assigned to Lucas began to defer to Melody's judgment after witnessing how effectively she navigated his meltdowns. They learned to anticipate potential triggers under her guidance, their initial suspicion transforming into grudging respect as his episodes decreased. Mr. Romano's associates are waiting in the West Parlor, announced Carlo, Gabriel's right-hand man, during a rare moment when Gabriel was playing chess with Lucas on the terrace. The coded message clearly referred to business partners whose names were never spoken directly. Gabriel's expression darkened as he glanced toward his son, clearly reluctant to end their game. "Tell them I'll be there shortly," he replied, his tone shifting from father to something far colder, as he squeezed Lucas's shoulder gently before departing. The chess pieces remained untouched after Gabriel left, Lucas's attention drifting to the distant mountains. "They come to discuss territories," he said suddenly, startling Melody with his unexpected insight. "Father draws maps in his study at night when he thinks I'm asleep." Melody carefully maintained her neutral expression, unsure how to respond to Lucas's apparent awareness of his father's business activities. "Would you like to continue our game or try something different?" she asked instead, redirecting without dismissing his observation. Lucas's fingers traced the outline of the white queen piece, his eyes focused somewhere beyond the chessboard. "My mother liked to garden," he said quietly, the non-sequitur typical of his conversational style. "She grew roses where the shooting range is now." The casual revelation of violence disguised as normalcy struck Melody deeply, a reminder of the complex world she now inhabited. The mansion's beautiful grounds concealed darker purposes, just as Gabriel's paternal devotion existed, alongside whatever business required armed guards. The weeks turned to months, and Melody found herself adapting to life within the mansion's walls, just as Lucas was slowly expanding beyond his previously constricted existence. They established a communication system that honored his unique way of processing information. He smiled today, Gabriel noted one evening as he reviewed the security footage from Lucas's art therapy session, his voice carrying the wonder of a man witnessing something precious and rare. The screen showed Lucas actually laughing as Melody accidentally spilled paint. Gabriel's business associates came to recognize Melody as an extension of the family's protected inner circle, their initial dismissal giving way to careful respect after Gabriel coldly reprimanded a lieutenant who had spoken disrespectfully in her presence. "I've arranged for your mother's transfer to Providence Medical Center's private wing," Gabriel informed Melody after 3 months. "Dr. Layton will oversee her treatment personally. He's the leading oncologist on the West Coast." Melody's weekends visiting her mother became cherished islands of normalcy, though the black SUV with tinted windows and the 2 guards who, coincidentally, appeared wherever she went, served as constant reminders that her life was no longer entirely her own. The first hint that something had changed came when Gabriel doubled the security detail around the mansion's perimeter, adding infrared sensors and additional armed patrols that roamed the grounds at irregular intervals. "Just a precaution," he assured Melody, unconvincingly. Lucas noticed the change immediately, his heightened sensitivity to atmospheric shifts making him acutely aware of the underlying current of anxiety. "There are more guns in the house," he observed during their morning walk through the garden, his tone matter of fact. Melody found herself involuntarily cataloging unusual occurrences, hushed conversations that abruptly ended when she approached, unfamiliar cars parked just beyond the property line, and the way Gabriel checked his phone with increasing frequency, his expression darkening daily. The breaking point came during dinner, when Lucas suddenly stood and pointed toward the window overlooking the eastern garden. "There's a man in the trees," he announced calmly, continuing to eat his precisely arranged pasta, as though he hadn't just triggered a security alert. Gabriel's response was immediate and frightening. Within seconds, he had moved Lucas and Melody away from the windows while barking orders into a concealed microphone in his watch. Armed men materialized from seemingly nowhere, creating a protective formation around them. "Stay here, no matter what happens," Gabriel instructed, punching a code into a keypad that revealed a hidden surveillance system monitoring every corner of the property. The reinforced door closed with a heavy thud behind him, leaving them in what appeared to be a bunker. Lucas seemed surprisingly calm despite the chaos, settling into his favorite weighted blanket with the detachment of someone who had experienced similar situations before. "The Vasquez family has been watching us for 3 weeks," he remarked casually, once again surprising Melody. Through the surveillance monitors, Melody watched with horror as men in tactical gear engaged in a firefight near the property's eastern boundary. The silenced weapons created an eerily quiet ballet of violence, bodies dropping while Gabriel directed operations from a command center. "This happens every few years," Lucas explained, his attention focused on a complex puzzle box rather than the violence unfolding on the screens. "Someone tries to take Father's territory, they disappear, and we get new security protocols." Melody's mind raced as she processed the reality of her situation. She had known Gabriel's business wasn't legitimate, but the scale and organization of what she was witnessing went far beyond what she had imagined. The dedicated father was simultaneously a cold tactician. "You should check the northeast camera," Lucas suggested without looking up from his puzzle, his fingers working the intricate mechanisms with practiced precision. "That's where they always try to breach when the main attack is a distraction." With trembling hands, Melody switched the feed to the suggested camera, gasping as she spotted 3 figures in black tactical gear advancing through a blind spot in the garden's defensive perimeter. Without thinking, she grabbed the radio Gabriel had left behind to warn him. The response was immediate. Guards materialized to intercept the infiltration team, just as they reached the mansion's service entrance, preventing a successful breach. On another monitor, Melody caught Gabriel's expression of surprise, followed by understanding as he redirected resources. Hours later, when the property had been secured and the threat neutralized, Gabriel found Melody and Lucas exactly where he had left them, the young man asleep beneath his weighted blanket, while she remained vigilant beside him. "You saved lives tonight," Gabriel acknowledged quietly. "Lucas saved lives," Melody corrected gently, gesturing toward the sleeping form beside her. "He noticed the pattern before anyone else. I just passed along the information." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, a teacher recognizing her students' achievements. Gabriel didn't waste time with questions or disbelief. Lucas had never made such an accusation before, and the gravity in his son's eyes spoke volumes. "We're having a family dinner tonight," he announced calmly, his voice betraying none of the turmoil Melody could see in his eyes. The USB drive Melody slipped to Gabriel beneath the breakfast table contained irrefutable evidence of Victor's betrayal, including recordings of the lieutenant discussing plans to eliminate both Gabriel and Lucas to take control of the organization. His partnership with the Vasquez family had been years in the making. Gabriel's face remained impassive as he reviewed the footage in his private study, his only visible reaction the slight tightening of his jaw as he watched his oldest friend and confidant plotting his murder. 27 years, he murmured, closing the laptop with deceptive gentleness. The preparations were made with terrifying efficiency, Gabriel's loyal security team discreetly replacing staff members suspected of working with Victor while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. Melody was instructed to keep Lucas in his suite, away from the coming confrontation. "You should stay with him," Gabriel told Melody, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them as he looked toward Lucas's closed door. "Whatever happens tonight, he trusts you more than anyone else in this house, perhaps more than he's ever trusted anyone." The rare display of vulnerability from the normally stoic crime lord caught Melody off guard, forcing her to confront the complex reality of her feelings toward both father and son. She had long since stopped seeing them as employer and charge, instead viewing them as something dangerously close to family. Lucas refused to remain in his room despite Gabriel's instructions, insisting on joining the dinner with uncharacteristic determination. "Victor will only make his move if both of us are present," he explained with unsettling clarity. "He needs to eliminate the entire Castillo line at once." The formal dining room felt like a stage set for a particularly deadly play, crystal glasses reflecting the chandelier light as Gabriel's most trusted lieutenants gathered around the massive oak table. Victor arrived exactly on time, his practiced smile never reaching his cold eyes. "To loyalty," Gabriel proposed as the first toast of the evening, his gaze locked with Victor's as they raised their glasses in a silent confrontation that only those who knew the truth could recognize. The atmosphere crackled with tension beneath the veneer of normalcy. Lucas sat beside Melody, his fingers tapping a specific pattern on her wrist that they had developed as a private communication system over the months. The message was clear. Victor was not alone in his betrayal. Someone else at the table was also compromised. Melody scanned the gathered faces, trying to identify the second traitor through the subtle cues Lucas had taught her to recognize. A slight shift in posture when certain topics arose, a tendency to touch one's face when lying, patterns of speech that indicated deception. Her eyes landed on Maria, Gabriel's personal assistant who had always been kind to Lucas. Noticing how she subtly checked her watch and positioned herself near the door as the main course was served. The realization struck just as Victor made his move, reaching for his concealed weapon. Lucas reacted before anyone else, knocking his water glass into Victor's lap, with seemingly clumsy movements that effectively disrupted the lieutenant's attempt to draw his weapon. The momentary distraction gave Gabriel's security team the seconds they needed to neutralize the immediate threat. In the ensuing chaos, Melody grabbed Lucas and pulled him beneath the heavy oak table as gunfire erupted across the dining room. Maria had produced a weapon of her own, confirming Lucas's suspicion of a second betrayal as she fired at Gabriel before being tackled by loyal guards. "Stay down," Melody whispered urgently, shielding Lucas with her body as the sounds of struggle continued above them. The dinner party transformed into a battlefield that would determine the future of the Castillo Empire. For the first time, her protection of Lucas felt more personal than professional. The gunfire lasted less than 30 seconds, but to Melody it seemed like hours as she held Lucas beneath the table, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give away their position. The young man remained eerily calm in her arms, his breathing steady despite the chaos. When silence finally fell, Gabriel's voice cut through the stillness, calling for Lucas with uncharacteristic emotion breaking through his usually controlled tone. "We're here," Melody responded, carefully guiding Lucas from their hiding place to face the aftermath of violence. The dining room resembled a war zone, overturned furniture, shattered crystal, and dark stains spreading across the imported carpet where Victor and 2 other traitors had fallen. Gabriel stood amidst the destruction, a bleeding gash across his forehead but otherwise unharmed. Maria escaped through the service entrance, one of the remaining guards reported, pressing a cloth to a bullet wound in his shoulder. She took Franco and Domingo with her. They were all working for the Vasquez family. Gabriel's expression hardened into something Melody had never witnessed before. Not the controlled anger she had occasionally glimpsed, but a cold, merciless fury that transformed him into someone unrecognizable. "Find them," he ordered quietly. "No one betrays my family and lives." Lucas moved through the chaos with unexpected purpose, kneeling beside one of the injured guards to apply pressure to a bleeding wound with mechanical precision. "Femoral artery," he stated matter-of-factly. "He needs a tourniquet immediately or he'll bleed out in 3.7 minutes. Melody rushed to assist, tearing a tablecloth into strips as Lucas directed her with surprising authority, his encyclopedic knowledge of human anatomy, guiding them through emergency first aid that saved the guard's life before medical help could arrive. His hands remained perfectly steady throughout. "Where did you learn to do that?" Gabriel asked his son later, after the wounded had been taken to their private medical facility and the cleanup crew had begun erasing evidence of the confrontation. Wonder and regret mingled in his expression as he looked at Lucas with new eyes. "YouTube videos and medical textbooks," Lucas replied simply, his fingers fidgeting with a loose thread on his sleeve. "I've watched 342 trauma surgery videos since Mother died. I wanted to know how to stop people from bleeding when they get shot." The innocent explanation carried heartbreaking implications. A child processing his mother's violent death by obsessively studying how to prevent such outcomes, preparing for a future where he might save others from similar fates. Gabriel's composure fractured visibly at the revelation. The mansion's advanced security system suddenly flickered, plunging sections of the property into momentary darkness before the backup generators engaged. They're targeting the power grid, Gabriel realized, his tactical mind immediately assessing the implication of such a sophisticated approach from their enemies. Lucas moved to the security console with unexpected confidence, his fingers flying across the keyboard to activate redundant systems even Gabriel hadn't known existed. I reconfigured the mansion's defense protocols last month, he explained matter-of-factly, bringing up camera feeds from blind spots that shouldn't have been monitored. Melody watched in astonishment as Lucas's modifications revealed 3 separate infiltration teams already breaching the outer perimeter, using routes that would have been invisible to the standard security system. The young man who struggled with basic social interaction had secretly created a defensive masterpiece that might now save all their lives. Security alerts interrupted the moment, reports flooding in of Vasquez family members approaching the estate boundaries in what appeared to be a coordinated attack. With their inside informants exposed, the rival family had abandoned subtlety in favor of overwhelming force. Get Lucas to the panic room, Gabriel instructed Melody, already moving toward his private armory as alarms blared throughout the mansion. Emergency Protocol Delta. If I don't return within 6 hours, the helicopter on the east pad will take you both to the safe house in Vancouver. Lucas refused to move, his usually compliant behavior replaced by unexpected defiance. They'll breach the south wall first because the rainwater drainage system creates a structural weakness, he announced with absolute certainty. But they don't know about the underground tunnels Father built last year. Gabriel froze, turning to stare at his son with newfound understanding dawning across his features. The tactical assessment was professional level, revealing how much Lucas had absorbed simply by watching and listening over the years, cataloging information others assumed he couldn't comprehend. The tunnels lead to the boathouse, Lucas continued, already moving toward the hidden entrance behind the fireplace in Gabriel's study. We can flank them from the water approach while they focus on the main gates. They'll never expect a counterattack from that direction. The plan was both brilliant and terrifying, not just because of its tactical soundness, but because it came from Lucas, who had never before demonstrated such strategic thinking or willingness to engage directly with his father's dangerous world. Melody saw both pride and fear battle in Gabriel's eyes. The Vasquez family's attack failed spectacularly, their forces caught in the unexpected pincer movement Lucas had orchestrated using his father's resources and his own uncanny understanding of tactical weaknesses. By dawn, the rival organization had been decimated, their leadership captured or eliminated. You have your mother's mind, Gabriel told Lucas quietly, as they watched the sunrise from the mansion's eastern terrace, the property secure once more, though bearing the scars of battle. She could always see the patterns others missed. It's why I fell in love with her despite our family's hatred. Lucas processed this new information about his mother with visible interest, adding it to his carefully constructed internal catalog of memories and facts about the woman he had lost too young. Would she approve of what we've become? He asked with uncharacteristic directness, his question striking at the heart of Gabriel's carefully constructed world. The question hung between them, forcing Gabriel to confront truths he had avoided for years, how far he had strayed from the man his wife had loved, how thoroughly he had immersed their son in a world of violence despite his best intentions to keep Lucas separate from the business. No, Gabriel finally admitted, the single syllable carrying the weight of years of regret. Your mother wanted us to leave this life behind. We were planning our exit strategy when she was killed. The confession seemed to physically age him, shoulders slumping under invisible burdens. Melody watched the exchange from a respectful distance, understanding that she was witnessing a pivotal moment between father and son. The vulnerability Gabriel displayed with Lucas was something she suspected few had ever seen from the notorious crime lord. We could still leave, Lucas suggested with the straightforward logic that characterized his thinking. The Vasquez family is gone. Victor's network is exposed, and you have enough money in the Cayman accounts to disappear completely. His matter-of-fact delivery couldn't disguise the longing in his voice. Gabriel's expression shifted through multiple emotions, surprise at Lucas's knowledge of the offshore accounts, consideration of the possibility he'd long abandoned, and finally, a tentative hope that Melody had never before seen on his face. It would mean starting over completely, he cautioned. I want to study marine biology, Lucas announced unexpectedly, pulling up images of ocean ecosystems on his tablet. The coral reefs in Australia have 1,625 species of fish, and I've memorized 1,342 of them already. His eyes shone with genuine passion that transcended his usual factual recitations. Gabriel's face softened with a poignant mixture of joy and regret. In all their years together, he had never known his son harbored dreams beyond the gilded cage he'd built to protect him. The Great Barrier Reef is certainly an option, he conceded, adding another potential location to their escape plan. Melody felt a rush of emotion as she watched this transformation unfold before her eyes. The feared Mafia boss and his remarkable son, planning a future centered around university research and coral reefs rather than territory disputes and rival families. The simple humanity of their discussion struck her more powerfully than any of the violence they'd survived together. "I've compiled a comprehensive exit strategy," Lucas continued, producing a tablet from his ever-present backpack and displaying a meticulously organized flowchart. "New identities, asset transfers through untraceable channels, property acquisitions in 5 potential locations, all with suitable medical facilities for Mom." The casual inclusion of Melody's mother in his plans stopped her heart momentarily, the implication clear. In Lucas's mind, she was coming with them if they left. More surprising was Gabriel's lack of objection, his eyes meeting hers briefly with an unspoken question that made her pulse quicken. "I also factored in requirements for continuing Melody's education," Lucas added, scrolling to a detailed analysis of university programs and their potential new locations. The University of British Columbia has excellent psychology programs, and their campus accommodations for neurodivergent students are exceptional. 3 months later, Gabriel Williams and his son Lucas were established residents of a coastal property outside Vancouver, their past identities buried along with the Castillo crime empire that Gabriel had dismantled from within before disappearing. The transition had been seamless, orchestrated with the same precision that had once made Gabriel a feared criminal leader. Melody's mother occupied the guest cottage on the property. Her cancer in remission, under the continued care of specialists Gabriel had ensured would follow them to their new life. The woman who had once worried about affording basic treatments now spent her days tending a garden that rivaled the mansion's, but lacked its darker purpose. Lucas flourished in their new environment, enrolled in university courses that challenged his brilliant mind, while working with a therapist who specialized in trauma and autism. His progress accelerated without the constant undercurrent of danger that had characterized their previous life. Gabriel's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. The former crime lord channeled his organizational skills and financial acumen into legitimate business ventures, his protective instincts finding healthier expression in philanthropy, focused on helping families affected by violence. The dangerous edge that had once defined him softened, though never completely disappeared. Melody found herself in an unexpected role, neither employee nor outsider, but something far more significant to both father and son. When Gabriel finally found the courage to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing between them, it felt less like a revelation, and more like the natural conclusion to a story that had begun with a simple food delivery on a stormy night. Thank you all for following this story to its end. If you've enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is essential for me to continue creating content here.